My in-laws secretly invited the woman they always wanted my husband to marry to my baby shower. I was 8 months pregnant, surrounded by people I was supposed to trust, and the woman who almost destroyed my relationship was standing in the room smiling at me. And not one single person in that room thought I deserved the truth. That image alone should make your blood boil. Because mine absolutely did when I heard this story. So let me take you back to where this all begins, because the history here is not just important, it is everything. Our narrator met her now husband when they were teenagers. They dated for 3 years in high school, which is a real, meaningful chunk of time at that age. That is not a fling. That is a formative relationship. Think about who you were at 15 or 16, how deeply you felt things, how much those early relationships shaped the way you understood love and loyalty and what you deserved from another person. 3 years of that. 3 years of being chosen, of building something, of weaving your identity into someone else's. But there was a problem, and that problem had a name, even if we are not using it today. A female family friend who was, in her own words, constantly inserting herself into their relationship. Not occasionally. Not awkwardly showing up at parties. Constantly. That word is doing a lot of work, and it tells you everything you need to know about the kind of energy this woman was bringing. The kind of presence that makes you feel like you are always performing, always defending something that should have felt safe, always looking over your shoulder at someone who is supposed to be peripheral but somehow keeps ending up in the center of the frame. Now, there was never any physical cheating during the relationship itself. Our narrator is clear about that. But then they broke up, and that is when things took a turn that I honestly was not fully prepared for. After the breakup, her future husband was seeing both of them at the same time for about a year. Both women. Simultaneously. And here is the part that made my stomach drop. The other woman knew about our narrator. She knew the whole time. She had full visibility into the situation, full knowledge of who else was in the picture, and she made a deliberate choice to stay anyway, to keep that information to herself like a card she was holding close to her chest. But our narrator had absolutely no idea that this other person even existed in that capacity. She was being lied to by omission in the cruelest possible way, kept in the dark while someone else had full information and used it as power. There is something particularly devastating about that kind of asymmetry. One person walking around with the complete picture while you are stumbling through a version of events that has been quietly edited to remove the most important parts. That is not just painful. That is a betrayal that plants itself in your chest and grows roots. The kind of thing that does not fully go away no matter how much time passes or how many conversations you have about it. Because it was not just about the other woman. It was about a pattern of not being told the truth by someone who was supposed to choose her. And that pattern, as we are about to see, did not stay in the past where it belonged. Eventually both of them moved on. They dated other people, lived separate lives for a while, and then, the way life sometimes does, they found their way back to each other. They reconnected, fell back in love, worked through whatever they needed to work through, and got married. And now they are expecting a baby. So on paper, they made it. They built something real from the wreckage of their younger years. That is actually a beautiful thing when you think about it, the kind of second chance story that people write songs about. But the problem with building on old ground is that sometimes the cracks from before are still underneath you, just waiting for enough weight to split them open again. And a baby, as full of joy as that is also weight. It is the kind of life event that shifts every relationship around it, that clarifies who people really are when something truly matters. Enter the baby shower. The moment that should have been pure joy. A celebration of new life, of family, of the next chapter. Picture that day as it was supposed to look. A room filled with soft colors and paper streamers, plates of food that someone spent time preparing, the low hum of conversation between women who are supposed to love you, gifts stacked in a corner, everyone leaning in to feel the particular warmth of a day that only comes once or twice in a life. Our narrator was planning this event surrounded by people who were supposed to be her family now, her in-laws, the people she was trusting to help her bring this milestone to life. 8 months pregnant, which means she is uncomfortable in ways that are hard to put into words. Her body is doing extraordinary and exhausting work. She is emotionally raw in the way that late pregnancy makes you, where everything feels closer to the surface, where the stakes of every interaction feel sharper because there is a whole new person coming who will need you to have things figured out. And then came the conversation that should have been simple. His family was still close with this other woman's family. The in-laws mentioned wanting to invite her. Our narrator said clearly and calmly that she was not comfortable with that. Not hysterical. Not dramatic. Just a direct, honest expression of a very reasonable boundary given the very specific and painful history involved. Let me just sit here with that for a second because I need you to understand how much courage it takes to say that out loud. She was not asking for the world. She was not demanding anyone cut off a lifelong friendship. She just said, I would prefer if this specific person were not at my baby shower. That is one of the most personal requests a person can make. She opened herself up and said, this is something that would hurt me. She made herself vulnerable to the people who were supposed to be on her side. And it was dismissed before the ink was even dry. What happened next is where this story goes from painful to infuriating. The in-laws came back to her with an explanation. They told her that this woman had essentially invited herself through her parents. That nobody had personally extended an invitation to her. So the story became, oh, it just happened, nobody could stop it, what could we do? And our narrator, because she was 8 months pregnant and surrounded by people she wanted to believe, accepted that. She held her discomfort, swallowed the bitterness, and tried to get through her own baby shower with grace. Tried to smile in the photographs. Tried to be present in the moments she will one day want to remember. All while this woman stood in the room that was supposed to be her sanctuary, and all while the people around her watched it happen and said nothing. And then the younger sister told her the truth. She had been personally invited. Multiple family members knew. Multiple family members had stood there and looked this pregnant woman in the face and said things that were simply not true. Not one of them flinched. Not one of them pulled her aside in a quiet moment, lowered their voice, and said, look, I need to tell you something because you deserve to know. They all held the line together. They looked at each other across that room, at the food and the decorations and the woman who was 8 months along with a child who would be their family, and they kept the story straight. That level of coordinated dishonesty is not an accident. That is a group of people who sat down, decided on a version of events, and committed to it. And the person they decided to deceive was the one carrying the next generation of their family. I cannot stress enough how much worse this is than if they had just ignored the boundary openly. If they had said, we hear you, but this woman is part of our lives and she is coming, that would have been disrespectful and hurtful. But at least it would have been honest. At least she could have made an informed decision about how to respond, whether to push back harder, whether to reach out to her husband, whether to simply not attend her own shower rather than sit in a room with someone she had asked not to be there. What they actually chose to do was far more calculated. They decided she did not deserve the truth. They looked at her distress, her history, her vulnerability as a pregnant woman trying to enjoy one of the happiest days of her life, and they thought, she does not need to know. We will manage this for her. Except they were not managing it for her. They were managing it for themselves. Because here is what this is really about, and our narrator puts it so clearly that it almost breaks your heart. It is not even necessarily that this woman attended. It is that she expressed a boundary, was ignored, and then lied to. And underneath all of that is something older and deeper that this situation just cracked wide open. The feeling that his family always preferred this other woman. That they always saw her as the one he should have ended up with. And whether or not that is explicitly true, when you invite someone to your daughter-in-law's baby shower specifically against her wishes and then lie to her face about it, you are sending a message. You may not say it out loud. But you are absolutely sending it. Now I want to talk about the husband's reaction because this might be the most important part of the whole story. She comes to him with what his sister told her. She is not storming in with accusations. She is not looking to burn anything down. She is coming to him hurt and shaken and probably exhausted in the specific way that happens when you realize the thing you feared was true all along. She is coming to him the way you go to the one person in the world who is supposed to see you completely. She is presenting him with information and sitting back to see who he decides to be in this moment. And what does he do? He immediately moves to defend his mother. He suggests that his sister is the one who is lying. Not his mother. Not the family members who looked his wife in the eyes and told her something that was not true. No, the one who told the truth is suddenly the problem. His first instinct was not to ask if she was okay. It was not to reach across whatever distance had opened up and take her hand. It was not to say, "Let me find out what actually happened because you matter more to me than protecting anyone's story." It was to protect his family's version of events at the direct expense of his wife's reality. And that right there is the wound inside the wound. Because she did not just marry a man. She married into a family. And that family has shown her, repeatedly, that she is not the one they would have chosen. And now her husband is showing her that when it comes down to it, he will reach for the shield before he reaches for her hand. This is not a small thing. This is not a misunderstanding or a bad day. This is a pattern that started when they were teenagers and has never actually been interrupted, just paused, just covered over with enough love and good times that it seemed like maybe it was gone. But it was not gone. It was waiting. It was sitting quietly in the corner of every family dinner and every holiday and every moment where she laughed it off and told herself that the past was the past and people change and love is enough. It was waiting for a moment big enough to bring it back to the surface. And a baby shower, her baby shower, turned out to be exactly that moment. Let me be completely clear about where I stand on this, and I want you to hear every word of it. The in-laws were wrong. Not just for ignoring the boundary. Not just for inviting this specific woman to this specific event. But for conspiring together to look a pregnant woman in the face and lie to her. Every single adult in that family who knew the truth and stayed quiet chose themselves over her. They chose comfort over integrity. They chose their relationship with this other woman over their relationship with the mother of their grandchild. And the husband's response is just as serious as what his family did, because he had one job in that moment and he fumbled it completely. His job was not to figure out who was right. His job was not to launch an investigation or weigh competing testimonies. His job was to say, "I hear you, this hurt you, and that matters to me." Instead, he made it about loyalty to his mother, which tells her everything she needs to know about where she ranks when things get hard. A partner who chooses their family of origin over their spouse in moments of clear pain is not actually being a partner. They are being a child who never fully left home. What she needs now is not for him to destroy his family. What she needs is for him to sit down with them and make it crystal clear that this will never happen again. That her boundaries are his boundaries. That lying to his wife is not something his family gets to do and call it kindness. And if he is not willing to do that, if he keeps reaching for excuses and deflections instead of accountability, then she has a much bigger problem than one uncomfortable baby shower. Because the baby is coming. And the question of whether she can trust these people around her child is now officially on the table. Her feelings are not paranoia. They are not her being sensitive or letting old baggage ruin the present. They are the entirely rational response to a pattern of behavior that has never actually changed. She saw this clearly. She always saw it clearly. The only question now is whether the people around her are finally ready to see it too. My husband thinks I agreed to his new job, but I am quietly planning my exit and he has no idea. 9:41 p.m. She already knows how this ends. She has known for a while now. And she is not saying a word. There is something quietly devastating about a woman who has made up her mind and is simply waiting for the paperwork to catch up to the decision. So here is where we are. Our narrator is 27 years old. She has been with her husband for long enough to know him completely, and what she knows is this. He is gone 5 days a week now. The weekends are all she gets. And she said yes to this arrangement. She agreed to the job change with a calm face and a voice that gave nothing away. She probably stood in the kitchen or sat across from him at the table and nodded, because nodding was easier than opening a door she had already decided to walk through on her own timeline. What she did not tell him was why she said yes. And that why is the most important sentence in this entire story. She said yes because she was already doing everything herself. If being home with them was a priority, he would have found something closer. He chose the job. She chose her exit strategy. But let me back up because the job change is not really the beginning of this story. It is just the moment she decided to stop waiting for him to change. This has been building for 6 years. 6 years of being a stay-at-home mother, handling everything, carrying every task and every decision while he worked long hours and came home and essentially clocked out of the family. And she wants to be fair about it. He was working overtime to provide more financially. She acknowledges that. But there is a difference between providing and participating, and he was doing a lot of one and very little of the other. He would take the kids out maybe once every 2 weeks for half a day, and she was probably supposed to feel grateful for that. She was probably supposed to treat it like a gift he was giving her rather than the bare minimum a present parent owes their children. He would help with the house when she reached the point of telling him she was completely burnt out, but that is not help, that is crisis management. Real help is seeing what needs to be done and doing it before the person next to you has to collapse in order to be heard. What he was doing was waiting to be asked, which put the burden of managing him directly onto her shoulders on top of everything else she was already carrying. And she tried to explain this to him. She tried to put words to what the mental load actually feels like, this invisible weight of tracking every appointment and every grocery list and every emotional need in the household, the kind of labor that never appears on a to-do list because it lives entirely inside one person's head, and his response was essentially to continue doing exactly what he was doing. She described a conversation about dinner that is so painfully relatable it almost hurts to read. She asked not to have to make one more decision that day. Just one evening where she did not have to be the one to figure it out. She was not asking for the moon. She was asking for 1 hour of not being the person in charge. And he turned it back on her like she was being unhelpful. Like her exhaustion was an inconvenience to his desire to please her. Like the problem was that she was not communicating her needs in a way that was convenient enough for him to act on. That is not a man who understands what his wife is living. That is a man who has convinced himself he is trying while making sure the effort never actually costs him anything. Now here is where it gets complicated, because he is not just passive about domestic life. He is actually quite controlling when it comes to finances and major decisions about the kids. So it is not that he is disengaged from everything. It is that he has divided the household into 2 categories. Things he finds important, where he has opinions and authority and makes final calls without much discussion. And things he finds tedious, where she handles it and he is available for consultation if she really pushes. And the problem with that system is that it puts her in the position of doing all the labor while sharing none of the power. She carries everything and decides nothing. The situation with their oldest child made me stop completely when I read it. Their child needed speech therapy, occupational therapy, and feeding therapy as a toddler. These are not optional extras. These are interventions that shape a child's entire developmental trajectory, interventions that require research and scheduling and advocating and showing up consistently, week after week, in waiting rooms and therapy gyms and meetings with specialists. And he wanted to fight her on it. He did not want to accept that their child was special needs. Maybe it felt like a reflection of something he did not want to see. Maybe it threatened an image he had built of what his family was supposed to look like. Whatever the reason, his compromise, and I want you to really sit with this word compromise, his compromise was that the child could attend the therapies but remain undiagnosed. So she had to fight for her child to get the help they needed while simultaneously managing his feelings about it. She was doing the research, making the appointments, advocating in rooms full of professionals, while also trying to protect his ego about what their child's needs meant for him. She had to hold her child in one arm and her husband's discomfort in the other. That is a staggering amount of weight to carry for one person. Let me just say this plainly. That is not a partnership. That has not been a partnership for a long time. Last year she reached the breaking point. She told him she wanted to leave. She said it out loud. She did not whisper it or imply it or leave it hanging in the air for him to interpret however was most comfortable. She said it clearly, with the full weight of 6 years behind it. And he responded the way people sometimes do when they are suddenly scared of losing something they have taken for granted. He promised to do better. He promised quality time, more involvement, real change. And for 3 or 4 months, it actually happened. She could see him trying. She could feel a shift in the air, something lighter in the evenings, something that reminded her of who they might have been before the weight set in. And then it evaporated. Slowly at first, and then all at once, they were right back where they had been. Except now she had concrete proof that he was capable of doing better and had simply chosen to stop when the pressure lifted. That is the thing about a promise that gets kept for 90 days and then abandoned. It tells you more than no promise at all would have. Because now you know it is not that he cannot do it. It is that the motivation runs out when the immediate threat passes. She was only worth the effort when leaving felt real to him. When she stayed, the effort went with her. At the same time she was navigating all of this, she was in school. She was getting certified in a new field while managing the household and the kids and the emotional weight of a marriage that was collapsing under its own neglect. She was probably studying after the kids went to bed, sitting at a kitchen table with notes spread out in the quiet, building something for herself in the only hours that belonged entirely to her. She was strategic about what she chose too. Not a dream career necessarily, but something that would give her flexibility, something that would let her be there when her kids needed her, something that would not punish her for having a child with special needs who might require an emergency pickup. She was quietly building a life she could survive on her own, while still standing in the one she shared with him. And then he came to her and asked if she was okay with the new job. And she said yes. Not because she was okay with it, but because she had already done the math. She was already doing 100% of the parenting. Having him home on weekdays had not been contributing enough to tip the scales. If anything, having one fewer person to manage would simplify her days. So she let him go. She let him believe they were aligned. She did not tell him what she was thinking. And now he is 5 days a week gone, and she is quietly building the exit. Is she being shitty for not telling him that his job choice is costing him his marriage? I have been sitting with that question and here is where I land. No. She is not being shitty. And I want to explain exactly why I feel that strongly about it, because I know some people will disagree with me. She already told him. She told him last year when she said she wanted to leave. She told him every time she explained what the mental load was doing to her. She told him in every conversation where she asked for support and received a temporary patch instead of a real fix. She has been telling him for 6 years. The information has been available to him this entire time. What she is being asked to do now, apparently, is tell him one more time, in slightly different words, and hope that this time it lands differently than all the other times. She is done hoping. And that is not cruelty. That is exhaustion. The people who would call her shitty for this are imagining that he does not know. But he knows. He has been told. He made a unilateral decision about a job that would take him away from home for the majority of the week and then asked her if she was okay with it after the fact. He did not sit down and say, I want to talk about what this would mean for you and the kids, what would need to change, how can we make this work together? He asked if she was okay and accepted her okay at face value because it was easier than interrogating it. He chose not to look closer. Here is my final take, and I mean every word of this. She is not letting him dig his own grave. He has been digging it for 6 years. She just finally stopped handing him the shovel. She has been running a household, raising children, fighting for one of those children's medical needs, going to school, managing every decision, absorbing every dropped ball, and doing it all while staying, while trying, while telling him what she needed and watching him meet the minimum just long enough to keep her. She has been more than fair. She has been extraordinary. The question was never whether she was being shitty. The question is whether she is going to be okay when she gets to the other side of this. And based on everything she has already survived inside this marriage, I think the answer to that is yes. She is going to be more than okay. Because she is already doing it alone. She is just about to get credit for it. Drop a comment below telling me which story hit harder for you, and if you are new here, like and subscribe because there is plenty more where that came from.